Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Carolyn and I am a body positive personal trainer and a body image coach. Today we are talking about BMI and why it is absolute complete bullshit. So you've probably heard of BMI, also known as body mass index. It's a very popular measurement that you've probably seen in your doctor's office or heard from some health or fitness or nutrition professional. And so today we're going to talk about exactly what it is, how this metric was developed, and all the reasons why I believe we really need to just abandon it and stop using it. So BMI, or body mass index, is a ratio of your weight in kilograms over your height in meters squared. This ratio was developed by a Belgian scientist in the 19th century as a way to measure and map body size of populations. These days, BMI is commonly used to estimate the fatness of individuals, to categorize people into body size categories, and to assess health risk based on body size. But despite how widespread and common the use of BMI is in this way we use it today is actually extremely inaccurate, problematic, and actually pretty harmful. And in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly why I believe that is. So first, a little bit of history. I'm gonna reference my notes for this one, so don't mind me if I am looking down a little bit. So BMI, like I said, was first invented, or at least the ratio for BMI was first invented by this Belgian scientist named, and I'm going to butcher this, Adolphe Quetelet. Probably saying that wrong. I'm only going to say it a couple times in this video. But so basically, he developed this ratio in the 1930s as a part of his personal interest in studying human populations, the human body, and he was using it as a way to just map out the body size of populations. He was also a statistician and was really just interested in numbers and measurements and averages especially. And he even specifically said during his time alive as a scientist and a researcher and a mathematician that this ratio he was using was not meant to be used on an individual person-by-person basis. He explicitly said that it was not for individuals and to be used only in the study of populations, and that's really important to note. So he used this number in his own studies, but after his death in the 1870s, I believe, it kind of got lost, went out of favor. People weren't really using it for anything in particular, unless I guess they were, disciples of his work specifically. But then in the 1970s was when we saw this resurgence in the use of this ratio, this height to weight squared ratio. Now, before the 70s, there was a little bit of stuff going on in the medical world and the health insurance world that led to this number being brought into the general public lexicon. So basically, in the 1940s, health insurance companies were noticing trends in their own, data of their customers that in certain situations, it seemed like body size may be linked to certain health risks. So these were not scientific studies that they were going off of. It was just based on their consumer base and specifically a group of customers that purchased health insurance in like a certain time frame. Excuse me. So in the 1940s, insurance companies decided that they needed a way to categorize people so that they could, have better business practices, save money, charge people more if they were at greater health risk based on what they were determining. So they came up with all of these like really arbitrary and non-scientific ways of categorizing people based on body size. Lots of different companies have had different ways of doing it, and they changed and morphed over time. But one well-known one that if you are one of my older viewers, you may remember this. In the 50s and 60s, it was especially popular to categorize bodies based on frame size. So that would be small frame, medium frame, or large frame. And physicians even started using this categorization method in order to determine what an individual's ideal body weight is. So in the mid-century, there was already this desire from the medical community and from health insurance companies to be able to break people down into different body size categories and to make health judgments about them based on those body sizes or based on those categories. So then in 1972, that is where BMI comes in. Our friend, or not so friend, Ancel Keys, he was a huge researcher at the time. You may know him from his role in sparking the low-fat craze, which not so crazy about that. You may also know him for his role in running the now very famous Minnesota starvation experiment, which was a cruel and awful experiment for the subjects involved, but gave us a lot of really important information about how starvation impacts the human body. But anyway, so that's Ancel Keys. And in 1972, he did a study that popularized the use of what he coined BMI. So it was essentially Quetelet's ratio that he now gave a name to, and also created an index for that created body size categories. So didn't just map the numbers over a graph, but actually grouped those numbers into categories of body size. And these are categories that are very well known to us today. His method of using BMI is what we still use to this day in 2019 or whenever you are watching this video. So in this study, he was basically trying to show that this ratio, that Quetelet's ratio of height to weight, was a useful way to estimate fatness, and that's what we are working with today. I guess at the time it was decided that that was good enough, and everyone kind of rolled with it because it was easy and it was convenient, and there was a need for standardization in making body size categories, because obviously they were still there. People were still judging health and categorizing people based on body size, but it was all very arbitrary and not based in anything specific and standardized. So now here was a standardized way to categorize people, and it was the BMI, the body mass index. And so there are 4 main categories of the body mass index. There is underweight, normal weight, overweight, and obese. And you'll learn later in this video, I hate using all of those words, and I'll explain exactly why. But for the purpose of just the historical breakdown of where all this came from, you've got underweight, normal weight, overweight, and obese. So yeah, you've got your 4 categories, and these days the BMI is used to sort people into those categories, and based off of what category they are in, make judgments and assumptions about their health and their health risk, and then based on that, decisions about how they should be cared for in our healthcare system. BMI is also widely used in research purposes as a health metric to basically assess whether various lifestyle or drug or dietary interventions have an impact on someone's health via an impact on their BMI. So that's one metric that's used in a lot of health and nutrition research. But as I stated in the beginning, this way that we use BMI, that we use this ratio in our healthcare, in our research, in our judgments of people, is really inaccurate, it's really problematic, and it's causing a lot of harm. So first of all, it's inaccurate. I want to explain to you exactly why using BMI in this way is it just doesn't make any sense, and we shouldn't be doing it. So first of all, let's remember that the guy who invented the ratio that we now use to calculate BMI, he said specifically that this ratio was meant to map body size of populations, was meant to measure averages of body sizes in populations, and it's specifically not meant to be used on an individual basis. But look, I'm not going to stand here and say that just because a guy a couple hundred years ago said that something should be used in one way and not another, that's absolutely, how it has to happen. Like, I get that over time, as science advances and we learn new things, old technologies can take on new uses. So I'm not just going to leave it at that. I'm going to go into a bunch of other reasons why BMI is inaccurate. First of all, even though we use it as a way to estimate fatness, it's not an accurate way to estimate fatness. A person's body fat literally cannot be measured, neither the amount nor the percentage. It cannot be measured with just the variables of height and weight. Now, to researchers and, medical professionals and the people who use BMI, to their credit, they do call it an estimate, but it's a really, really inaccurate estimate. See, there's a lot of things that contribute to your body weight. Yes, we have fat on our bodies, but we also have muscle and bone and organs and connective tissue. And the amounts of those can vary from individual to individual. And that's exactly why you can take someone, say an athlete or a bodybuilder, or someone who just naturally has denser bones and more muscle mass, can be placed in an overweight or obese, a high BMI category, even if their body fat percentage doesn't match up to that. If you were to measure their body fat percentage and measure their BMI, they could have a very high BMI and a very low body fat percentage. And, I guess same thing could be said the other way around. Someone who is in a very small frame and has a, thin bones or brittle bones and a low amount of muscle mass could potentially have a higher BMI, a lower BMI, even though their body fat percentage is higher. Now, I'm not making any judgments about either of these types of people. I'm just saying that the ratio of height to weight is not going to be accurate in determining their body fat, that there's so many other factors that go into it that just knowing someone's BMI doesn't really tell us anything about how much fat they have on their bodies, if that's indeed something that we care about knowing. Secondly, because of the nature of the ratio, just how now I'm not a mathematician, but because of how fractions and, exponents work, people who are at the extreme ends of the height spectrum, so people who are very short or people who are very tall, their BMI is going to be exaggerated in one way or another compared to people who fall more near the center. And this is just a mathematical reality. This is just how the numbers work. But if we're trying to use these numbers and we're assuming that they're accurate and then we're making decisions about healthcare based on them, I think we need to take a little pause there, because the numbers aren't accurate. There's a lot of situations where they aren't. And so can we actually use them to make any kind of decisions, or is that misguided? I think it is. Which brings me to my next point. See, we're not just using BMI to categorize people. We're using BMI to make decisions about their healthcare. We are taking those BMI categories and using them to make judgments about a person's health, about their future health risk, and about how they should be treated in our healthcare system. But despite the fact that we are using it in this way and making very specific judgments about people based on our notions about BMI, the science doesn't actually support what the dominant belief and the dominant narrative and the dominant practices are. See, if you were to walk into a doctor's office and receive some kind of judgment or assessment based on your BMI, you can pretty much expect the same thing no matter where you go. There is a very widespread belief about how BMI and health are related and how someone's BMI reflects on their health status and their future health risk. So if we're to work our way through the categories starting with normal weight, even just the word normal, we assume that that is the best category to be in. Now, if you're underweight, that's not great, but because our culture is so obsessed with thinness and so fat phobic, we don't actually think being underweight is of that much concern. You know, maybe you're a little bit underweight, but that just probably means that you work out a lot and you eat healthy and you take care of yourself. And it's probably not a big deal unless you're like severely emaciated, in which case, you know, maybe we got to do something to step in. But if you're, you know, on the higher end, you're probably fine. And if you're in the normal category, well, you're definitely fine. But be careful, because the next category above, well, that's overweight, and you don't ever want to see yourself get there. If you're in the normal weight category, you can't totally relax. You got to make sure that you're doing everything you can to stay there. And while you're at it, you might as well stay on the lower end in like the safe zone, because the higher you creep up to the high end of that category, the more in danger you are of being bumped up to the next one, which is, like I said, overweight. This is where we start to get pretty concerned. If you're overweight, then you better watch out, because even if you're fine now, well, you've got a future of sickness and early death waiting for you. But you still have time to figure your shit out. So if you're overweight, you know, definitely be concerned, and take care of it now, but you've got a chance. You can get yourself into that normal category and be okay, like the rest of us, like the normal people. But if you're in that obese category, oh, well, you're pretty much fucked. I mean, you have to do something now. You got to get on this. You've got to get yourself under control. You've got to get your body in check, and you've got to get yourself as close to that normal category as you can, because honestly, as far as we're concerned, you are a ticking time bomb. You might as well be dead tomorrow. That's kind of the way that we think and talk about body size based on this BMI, this body mass index. And honestly, well, first of all, it's really fucked up just because of how judgmental it is and how assumptive it is. Is that a word? How many assumptions it makes about someone's health and their lifestyle. But even more than that, it's completely inaccurate. What the research actually says is completely different from the picture I just painted. In reality, the way that health and health risk maps onto BMI is not at all the way that we believe it is. In reality, you have the lowest chance of like an early death or an early mortality if you are in the overweight category. People in the overweight category are statistically most protected from death. Now, of course, we all die, but research speaking, just earlier than expected. Now, if you're in the normal category, statistically, you're actually at a slightly higher risk than someone in the overweight category. Now, this is not speaking individual to individual. These generalities cannot map onto an individual. And that's a part of what we talked about before that makes this so inaccurate. But in general, if we're talking statistically, people in the normal weight category die earlier than people in the overweight category. And here's the crazy part. This is the part that people probably believe the least. If you're in the obese category, your risk of death is about equivalent to someone or to the people in the normal weight category. The obese category and the normal weight category are about equivalent, and the overweight category is your best bet, or, you know, so the statistics say. And now on the other side of the spectrum, the underweight category, that's where you actually find the highest risk of death. That category that we tend not to worry too much about, but you want to keep an eye on it. No. That one is where the most danger lies. This is what the research says, but this is not how BMI is being used in doctors' offices and weight loss clinics and personal training gyms across the country. Instead, we're using that first narrative that is just not founded in anything other than just the spiraling fat phobic beliefs that our society has developed over the decades. And now to just add on top of this, When it comes to BMI, it's not the only determinant of health. In fact, it's probably one of the least important determinants of health. What's more important? Well, socioeconomic class, race, gender, just the level of oppression that you face in society, stress. These things are all hugely important to health risks, but we're so obsessed with body size and we're so obsessed with paying attention to this very simple metric that doesn't really tell us much that we lose that in the conversation. Now, there's other factors that contribute to our health that are in more of our control than our race or our gender or our level of oppression in society. And those factors also have a huge impact on our health, arguably bigger than BMI. So there's another really huge study that was done that looked at how the absence or presence of certain health behaviors impacted a person's health risk across, the BMI categories, or affected health risk across BMI categories. And what they found was surprising if you tend to believe in the very weight-centric focused version of health where the bigger is worse and smaller is better. What was found is that when there weren't a whole lot of health behaviors involved, when none of the 4 that they measured were present, then yes, body size was a predictor of health risk. People who were in the obese category were of higher risk than the overweight, of the normal, and then underweight was higher as well. But all of the bars on that graph were really, really high. Being of normal weight didn't protect you very much. Your health risk was still extremely high if you didn't incorporate any of these health behaviors into your life. Which, by the way, the health behaviors were eating a moderate amount of fruits and vegetables, exercising a moderate amount, consuming a moderate amount of alcohol, so that means like the 1 drink a day or 2 for women and 2 drinks a day for men, and not smoking. So if none of those were present, if you were a binge drinker who smokes and doesn't eat vegetables and never exercises, it doesn't matter how thin or how fat you were, your risk was really high. But the bigger the body size, the higher the risk to a certain degree. And that's what most people tend to expect. But here's where the surprises came in. As you added in health behaviors, the risk of the health risk decreased to the point where in the category where all 4 health behaviors were being observed, it didn't really matter what BMI category you were in. It was all pretty much the same. You had the same low risk, low health risk compared to people of varying body sizes. There is a tiny difference, and you can see in the graph, I'm gonna link these studies below. There is a difference, but that's where you actually see reflected where overweight had the lowest risk and obesity and normal weight were about equal. And actually, now that I'm remembering, underweight wasn't on this specific graph. So scratch what I said about underweight being higher. I would imagine that it would be, but don't take my word for that. Go read the study yourself. It's super interesting. Go look at that graph. But anyway, using BMI as the main predictor of health is just so inaccurate, because someone who is at a high BMI but participates in all these healthy behaviors, their health risk is so much lower compared to someone at a normal weight who participates in fewer healthy behaviors. So what I'm saying here is that BMI is not an accurate measure of body fatness, and it is not an accurate predictor of health risk. But despite this, it's being used widespread for both of those things. Which brings me to my next point, that the body mass index is not just inaccurate, oh no, it is also problematic and very harmful. And now the first reason that it's harmful is because it's so inaccurate. If you're basing your health recommendations for someone based on their body size and based on their BMI, there's a pretty good chance that you are not providing them with good health care. If a person who is in a high BMI category walks into your office complaining of some sort of health problem, and the only advice you give to them is to lose weight because they are at a higher BMI, that's shitty healthcare. That doesn't help anyone. Yet this type of medical fat phobia is happening all the time. It's also dangerous because people who are in those lower body size categories are less encouraged to participate in healthy behaviors. You know, if we are talking about health and public health, we don't want people of any size to be smoking or being sedentary or not eating fruits and vegetables. But if we're only recommending those things to people in larger bodies and we're not recommending them to people in smaller bodies, that's also really shitty healthcare. Basically, the fact that it's so inaccurate and that we're making recommendations based off it anyway means that a lot of people are getting the short end of the stick when it comes to what we could be providing in terms of healthcare and advice and support for living an actually healthy lifestyle. A focus on weight loss isn't going to do that, but a focus on healthy behaviors for everyone will. Secondly, the body mass index is stigmatizing as all hell, and stigma is really bad for health. So what do I mean by stigma? I mean weight stigma. The fact that a healthcare professional can look at a person, know their BMI, have preconceived notions about what that BMI means, that's stigma. That's that medical fat phobia I was talking about. And that stigma does so many awful things to people. It, one, like I already mentioned, creates a disparity in the type of healthcare that they receive because they are not taken seriously by their doctors, because their doctors insist on, for a variety of reasons, many of which are the insurance companies, have to focus so much of their time with the patient on talking about weight loss instead of talking about the actual matter at hand. And also, weight stigma prevents people in larger bodies from actually seeking out medical care in the first place. There are huge disparities, especially when we're talking about cancer, between larger bodied patients and smaller bodied patients. You know, first of all, if you're in a larger body and you expect to get stigma in the doctor's office and be on the receiving end of weight stigma, you're not going to go as often. You're not going to get your screenings. You are not going to even be able to be assessed for risk or for cancer. But then on the other hand, even if you do go into the office, there's a lower chance that you'll actually be given the tests that you should be given than if you were a person in a smaller body. Because, you know, so many of the things that are actual symptoms of real disease are attributed to fatness, and a part of that is because of the stigma that BMI places on the whole population. But the stigma that BMI plays into extends way beyond the doctor's office, because it's not only medical professionals that talk about BMI and know what it is. At this point, you know, it's been used since the 70s and it is household knowledge. Everyone knows what BMI is. Or, you know, anyone who has ever had an interest in like nutrition or fitness or has ever been to the doctor knows what BMI is. And that means we are all living with these horrible assumptions of what it means for our health. And we're judging ourselves and we're judging others because of it. One of the main, trolling criticism comments that I get on these YouTube videos and on my Instagram, one of the main arguments that people bring up have to do with BMI. They say, oh, if someone's obese, oh, if someone has a high BMI, then they need to be dedicating their lives to losing weight, is essentially what most people are trying to argue. But the fact that these measurements are so inaccurate and our use of them is so inaccurate, it just goes to show that we are believing something collectively that is entirely false, and we are hurting each other as the result of that. We are imposing standards upon each other of maintaining low body weight and a low BMI, and to do so in ways that are actually really unhealthy, when in fact for a lot of people, staying at a higher body weight and a higher BMI, but just living a life full of healthy behaviors is actually the best option. But that's not what we see as the best option, because the way that we see BMI and health relate, it just totally clouds our view of what is actually healthy and what is not. So for example, what I'm talking about here is dieting, food restriction, long-term deprivation. No matter what body size you're in, it's bad for you. It can lead to nutritional deficiencies. It's like a #1 risk factor for developing an eating disorder. But if you're in a larger body, those things are seen as healthy things to do, even though they are entirely not. I don't care if something causes weight loss. If it's an unhealthy behavior, it's an unhealthy behavior. But because of the way that we see BMI, because of the way that we see body size and we stigmatize body size, that's not what ends up happening. And that's how we've ended up in this diet culture that we're in. And we need to stop it. All right, I'm getting a little heated. I'm gonna bring in the reins a little bit. Like I'm literally getting hot. The air conditioning just kicked on. But you understand what I'm saying, right? That like BMI just plays into this system of weight stigma and oppression based on weight stigma that already exists. And so the more we continue to let ourselves believe that BMI is useful and accurate, the more we are hurting everyone. And even just the words themselves that are in the body mass index are stigmatizing. The words normal weight, overweight, and obese are automatically judgmental. Saying that someone is normal weight is saying that they are normal, is saying that they are acceptable, is saying that they are right, is saying that they are ideal. That is how those words associate in our society. Saying that someone is overweight is saying that there is too much of them. It's saying that they are too big, they have too much fat, and that is a bad thing. Saying that someone is obese, that's even worse. That word has so many negative connotations in our society. It just using it automatically imposes weight stigma on the people that are hearing it. Whether it is overtly stigmatizing them because they are in a larger body, or it's just playing into that internalized weight stigma and that fear of becoming that dreaded O word. So other than this video, you will never hear me use the words normal weight, overweight, and obese because of all of this, because they're stigmatizing for an inaccurate reason. Okay, so if you believe everything that I've said, if you've gone and looked at the research and you're like, oh my gosh, everything that I knew about BMI was just totally wrong. This thing is inaccurate. It is harmful. We shouldn't be using it anymore. So why the heck are we? Why is this inaccurate and harmful metric still being used in such a widespread way, even though we know how bad it is? Now, I wasn't able to find any research on this, so I'm just going to speculate on my own about why I think we're still using BMI, even though it's been known for so long how inaccurate it is, and I just laid out all the reasons why it's actually hurting a lot of people and preventing them from getting the health care that they need and deserve. The first reason is because it's really easy to use and it's really convenient. It's easy to explain, it's easy to understand, it's easy to print out a little chart and throw it up on the wall, and it's easy to have 4 neatly laid out categories that you can sort people into. And yeah, it's easy. For people who are, concerned with knowing someone's fatness level, the other methods of obtaining body fat percentage are a lot more complicated and expensive, and potentially like invading someone's personal space. So to get BMI, all you have to do is, ask for height and weight, or, have them step on the scale and, measure their height. That's pretty innocent feeling and easy to do. Other methods for measuring body fat are calipers, which pinch skin measurements, which are not quite as accurate, and you have to like measure people's legs and their stomach, and that can get into personal space and it takes a while. Or they're really expensive, like underwater weighing, which requires a whole laboratory setup. And so in a system where we think it's really important to have an estimation of someone's fatness and to categorize them into body size, which this system has been like that since the 40s, like I said. You know, it's been like this for a really long time. Because we believe that's important, we are also going to be drawn to the least expensive, easiest, and most convenient method of doing so, which, even if it's really inaccurate, it's going to be the one that we use. And now the other reason I think we've continued to use it is because, like I just said, we believe it's really important to know how fat someone is. Now, like the research field of fat studies is, I guess, relatively new compared to other sciences, but the research is solidly there that, like I explained earlier, body size is not directly correlated with health or health risk or time of death. You know, you cannot judge someone's health based on how big their body is. In certain situations, it can be useful to know someone's weight, but in general, if your goal is to help someone be healthier, you gotta care about their behaviors, and their body size really shouldn't matter to you. In the end, we do not know that there is a real and effective way to change someone's body size long term. It does happen for some people, but overall, in the grand scheme of things, changing someone's body size has not been shown to be possible in the long term. So we need to think about body size as a non-modifiable risk factor, just like someone's gender, just like someone's race, just like someone's socioeconomic class. We already do it with those things, which is why they aren't talked about as frequently in the doctor's office, which is why, you know, God, I mean, if you have pale skin and red hair, you're at higher risk of developing skin cancer. But no one's telling you to try to change your skin color or change your ethnicity. No, you're being given proper screenings, right? You're being given the proper health care. You're not just being told, oh, well, this is how you are and you need to change that, or like, you're gonna die. No one's telling that redheads with pale skin are ticking time bombs unless they do something about it. They're being told to wear sunscreen and be safe in the sun and change their behaviors, right? So why are we treating people in a completely different way when it comes to body size? Instead of just telling people, you gotta change this thing about you, we should be telling them, you need to take care of your health, and here's how. So, to go back to my question, why exactly do I think BMI is being used in such a widespread way? Well, it's because our society is fat phobic, and it has been for a long time, and we collectively believe that it's really important to know exactly how fat someone is. And if the other methods are figuring it out are too invasive or too expensive or too hard to do, then I guess we'll have to go with this version. Now, I believe we should just stop being so concerned about it in the first place. I think we should stop using BMI. We should stop talking about it. You know, of course, knowing someone's weight can be important for certain medications in children to track growth, but knowing someone's BMI, I honestly just cannot think of a reason why it would be important to know the ratio of someone's weight in kilograms to their height in centimeters squared. I don't know. It's inaccurate, and it's problematic, and it's harmful, and it needs to go. All right, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned something. If you have questions, if you have comments, leave them below. I would love to hear a little bit of discussion about this topic because I think it's interesting, and I don't think enough of us have critically thought about BMI, and we just kind of go along with what the dominant narrative is, even though, like I've pointed out, it doesn't make any sense. All right, thank you for your time, another long one. You know how it is over here. Hit that like button, make sure you subscribe. Feel free to share this video with anyone who you think needs to hear this message about BMI or would be interested in it. I post videos about once a month these days. Maybe someday I'll post a little more. And if you enjoy my content, if you learn from it, if you get value from it, I would love, love, love a little exchange in that value. You can support me on Patreon for just $2, $5, or $10 a month. There's a cool little community growing over there. And when you sign up, you automatically get access to a 4-part mini course on body acceptance and breaking into your body acceptance journey. So you can check that out as soon as you sign up to become a patron. And yeah, that is all. I will see you all in the next video.